Number 1.
On the evening of March 22, 1980, Rachael walked to Rose Corner Market, located on Route 108 in Newton, New Hampshire, where she was a regular. While there, she purchased some chewing gum and a pack of cigarettes with a $5 bill. Upon receiving her change, she departed from the store. This was at approximately 9 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. According to Peter Jewett, the owner of Rose Corner Market, he saw Rachael walking north on Main Street. Her family says she was planning on spending the night at a friend's house, which was located in the 50 block of the street. She never arrived at said friend's residence. On the morning of March 23, 1980, when Rachael hadn't returned home, her mother knew something was wrong and reported her daughter as missing to police around 10 a.m. On March 24, her mother telephoned administrators at Sanborn Regional High School to let them know her daughter wouldn't be in that day. She didn't specify the reason as to why. Given Rachael's age, her disappearance was initially treated by police as a runaway case. According to one of her friends, she had discussed running away around the time she vanished. Given this, no posters or flyers were put up around town. At the time, Newton's police department only had one full-time officer, as the then police chief had recently died. There was no mention of Rachael's disappearance in the department's town report for the year of 1980. When spoken to by investigators, the friend Rachael was supposed to be staying with on the night of March 22 said she hadn't made plans with her that night and was unaware she was coming over. The friend never saw Rachael. A search of the woods where Rachael frequented was conducted by a group of volunteer firemen and Boy Scouts. However, it produced no evidence or leads. While no wide-scale searches were done in relation to the case, helicopters were flown over nearby wooded areas, swamps and fields to try and find any trace of the missing girl. A search of the Garden home showed Rachael had left behind all of her belongings. Years after her disappearance, 2 witnesses came forward to say they'd seen Rachael talking with 3 men in a dark-colored car near Rose Corner Market. It's reported she knew the trio, who had troubled reputations and were involved in criminal activity. One of them would later serve time in prison for assault and rape. Allegedly, while at a bar in Haverhill, Massachusetts, one of the men confessed to killing Rachael. While specifics about this confession have not been released, it did prompt investigators to dig up a site off Route 108, beside a stone wall and a stream. However, no remains or evidence were found. It is currently unknown if any of the men were involved in Rachael's disappearance, and none of them have been publicly named. During the search, Rachael's parents consulted with psychics and hired private investigators, but their efforts proved fruitless. Her mother followed up on sightings from Haverhill and Hampton Beach, but both remain unconfirmed. In the 1990s, the State Major Police Crime Unit excavated a 60-square-foot patch of woods in town. No evidence was recovered. At one point during the investigation, a $10,000 reward was offered. Rachael is one of many missing females believed to have possibly been Princess Doe, an unidentified deceased female found in Blairstown, New Jersey on July 15, 1982. However, she has been ruled out as a match. In 2008, Newton police received a tip that led them to search Ice Pond and Country Pond, located within the area. 6 hours were spent using sonar and GPS equipment to look at the bottom of Ice Pond, while divers spent 2 days searching Country Pond. However, both searches brought up nothing. In 2013, the then police chief of Newton passed on a potential tip to the state cold case unit. Specifics haven't been revealed. According to police, they have chased every lead in the case. Along with the use of search dogs and consults with psychics, they've dug up numerous possible gravisites, but to no avail. Given the case is still open, they are unable to release much information to the public. Voluntary disappearance is still considered a possibility in Rachael's case. However, police are now investigating other theories, including the possibility of foul play. Rachael's dental records and DNA are currently available for testing. Before she went missing, she'd had some orthodontic work done, for which she wore a dental retainer. She had 3 dental fillings, and before having any orthodontic work done she'd had all 4 of her wisdom teeth removed. 1. The initial theory in the case is that Rachael voluntarily ran away from home. This was corroborated by the story she told to her parents the night she went missing regarding her staying over at a friend's house. Given the friend had not made plans with Rachael, some have questioned if she falsely told her parents this in order to get a head start. However, her family and those who knew Rachael find it uncharacteristic of her to leave home and feel she was too naive to set out on her own. 2. The other prevailing theory in the case is that Rachael's disappearance is the result of foul play. Police believe her to be deceased, and many who have reviewed the case feel the 3 men she was last seen speaking with to be involved. 3. Some online web sleuths feel Rachael's disappearance to be related to that of another missing New Hampshire girl, Laureen Rahn. Laureen went missing from Manchester, New Hampshire on April 26, 1980, and her disappearance is believed to have been at the hands of suspected serial killer Terry Rasmussen. There is currently no evidence linking the 2 cases. Many of Rachael's schoolmates didn't learn about her disappearance until months or years after it occurred. It was the general consensus that she either moved away or dropped out. As the years have gone by, Rachael's mother has become reluctant to talk about the case. Rachael Garden went missing from Newton, New Hampshire on March 22, 1980. She was 15 years old and was last seen wearing a 2-tone blue ski parka, a plaid shirt with silver threads, blue jeans and brown lace-up shoes. She was carrying a dark blue tote bag with the word "things" imprinted on one side. At the time of her disappearance, she was 5'13" and weighed approximately 100 pounds. She has light brown hair and hazel eyes, and her ears are pierced. Currently, the case is classified as a non-family abduction due to the lack of evidence. If alive, she would be 54 years old. If you have any information regarding the case, you can contact the Rockingham County Sheriff's Office at 603-679-2225 or the Newton Police Department at 603-382-6774.
Number 2.
On July 15, 1963, Mary Ann attended a carnival at St. Priscilla Catholic Church with some friends. The location was just over a mile from her home. At 10:15 p.m., she was last seen leaving the carnival. On July 17, 1963, Matilda and Eugene received a letter from their daughter, which was postmarked Oak Park, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, where the family often went shopping. In it, she wrote that she was experiencing a strange but educational experience, but noted that she was fine and would be sending them money soon. However, she didn't tell them where she was, as she didn't want anyone to interfere, and added that, while she would call, she might never see them or her friends again. Despite what she said in the letter, Mary Ann never again got in touch with her family. On August 7, 1963, the first media report about Mary Ann's disappearance was ran in the local paper. For years, her parents ran ads in newspaper personal columns, hoping someone would come forward with information, but no one ever did. In order to raise money for a reward fund, Mary Ann's mother took on a part-time job. However, it went unclaimed. Her parents aren't sure why she would have run away, as they weren't aware of any problems in her life. Investigators have established that, after she went missing, she joined an organization that sold magazines door to door. It had been en route to California at the time of her disappearance. In 1965, the couple who ran the group was questioned by the FBI and admitted to hiring Mary Ann. However, they gave conflicting statements as to what happened to her. While the wife said she'd left the group sometime after joining, the husband said she never left Chicago. On June 17, 1967, Alan J. Silver of New York was arrested at a motel on a charge of conspiracy to commit robbery. Both the family and the police were interested in him, as he'd had a magazine sales group that was in Chicago at the time Mary Ann went missing. A retired detective who had initially been assigned to the case stated that she believed his group to have been the one the missing girl had joined. It's currently unknown if Silver is the husband of the couple who was interviewed by the FBI. There have been no indications of Mary Ann's whereabouts since 1963. Her DNA has been tested against numerous Jane Does from across the United States, but no match has ever been made. One theory held by those online is that Mary Ann is alive and well. Given there's no evidence to prove she is deceased, it's thought that she might still be alive, with a family, and living in another part of the United States. 2. The primary theory held in the case is that the couple who ran the magazine organization were involved. Some have speculated that Mary Ann might have been sold into a sex ring, while others feel the pair abandoned her for not selling enough magazines. The latter was known to happen in similar organizations. 3. The final theory states that Mary Ann's disappearance is the result of foul play, and, as a result, she is currently deceased. Given the lack of evidence in the case, this can neither be proven or disproved at this time. Mary Ann Swialski went missing from St. Priscilla Catholic Church in Chicago, Illinois on July 15, 1963. She was 16 years old and was last seen wearing a black sleeveless blouse, white shorts and straw sandals. At the time of her disappearance, she was 5'23" and weighed approximately 102 pounds. She has blonde hair and hazel eyes. Currently, her case is classified as an endangered runaway. If alive, she would be 72 years old. Mary Ann's dentals and DNA are on file. If you have any information regarding the case, you can contact the Chicago Police Department at 312-744-8261 or FBI VICUP at 1-800-634-4097.
Number 3.
In the early morning hours of September 24, 1992, Dinwiddie, a 23-year-old art student, disappeared from the Five Points region of downtown Columbia, SC after getting separated from her friends at a bar. For those of you unfamiliar with the Palmetto State's capital city, Five Points is a hip dining and shopping district located just east of Columbia's city center. At night, its bars become a hub of the city's nightlife scene, not to mention a favorite drinking destination of students at the nearby University of South Carolina. In recent years, Five Points has become increasingly dangerous in the evenings, but back in the early 1990s it was still considered a relatively safe environment. On this fateful Wednesday evening, Dinwiddie, above, had accompanied her friends to Williams-Brice Stadium for a concert by the Irish rock band U2. After the show ended at approximately 11:15 p.m. EDT, Dinwiddie and her friends headed to Jungle Gyms, a nightclub in Five Points that closed down in early 2012. At some point, after entering the crowded bar, Dinwiddie and her friends became separated from each other. Shortly thereafter, at around 1 a.m. EDT on Thursday morning, Dinwiddie's friends departed, mistakenly believing Dail had either found a ride home or contacted her parents, who still live nearby, to retrieve her from the club. Dinwiddie had not left the club, though. Nor had her parents come to get her. At 1:15 a.m. EDT, Dinwiddie asked a bouncer at Jungle Gyms whether he had seen her friends. He had not. 15 minutes later, the brown-eyed, brown-haired young woman, standing all of 5 feet tall and weighing only 98 pounds, exited the bar, walking north on Hardin Street wearing a forest green pullover, faded jeans and a blue LL Bean jacket tied around her waist. No one has seen her or heard from her since. That's right. Nearly 30 years later, no trace of Dinwiddie has been found. The next morning, Dinwiddie's father noticed his daughter was not in her room when he woke up to let the family dog out of their home. Calls to friends yielded no news regarding her whereabouts, prompting Dinwiddie's parents to call the police. Theories abound as to what may have happened to Dinwiddie, and the Columbia Police Department and supporting law enforcement agencies at the local and state level have chased down thousands of tips and more than 1,000 leads over the intervening years. As we noted in our report last fall, law enforcement officers have traveled across the nation, questioned multiple potential suspects, and conducted all manner of searches and forensic tests in the hopes of solving the mystery. 28 years later, though. Nothing. Last fall, though, a faint glimmer of hope emerged. As we noted at the time, the alleged victim of a reported sexual assault communicated a possible lead in the case to agents of the SC State Law Enforcement Division, SLED. According to our sources, the victim told law enforcement that the man who allegedly assaulted her remarked to her how she reminded him of Dail Dinwiddie. The person who allegedly made this remark? Politically connected Columbia, SC attorney and former SC State Accident Fund, SCSAF, Director Harry Gregory, The same man whose home was raided last Thursday morning by police in connection with an ongoing child sex investigation. Gregory has since been charged with multiple counts of committing lewd acts on a minor in 2002 and 2004. According to our sources, his case will be referred to the Office of SC Attorney General Alan Wilson, who will determine whether to handle it personally or hand it off to a solicitor. Wilson is receiving the case because, according to our sources, SC Fifth Circuit Solicitor Byron Gibson has a conflict related to a prior case that involved Gregory. So, why did this news outlet not identify Gregory in connection with the Dinwiddie tip last fall? Several reasons. First and foremost, our law enforcement sources told us at the time they did not consider the Dinwiddie narrative provided to them by Gregory's accuser to be credible. While not discounting the rest of her story, police apparently determined early on that the reference she made linking Gregory to the missing woman was unfounded. In other words, while they couldn't say for certain whether her accusation of sexual assault was valid, they were able to determine that the connection between Gregory and Dinwiddie was untrue. Or, at least they deemed it to be untrue in the context in which it was reportedly raised by the alleged sexual assault victim. Obviously, that is a key distinction. At the time this rumor began making the rounds, police provided us with additional details as to why they reached this determination, but out of respect for the ongoing investigation we are declining to publish that information at this time. Similarly, we are declining to publish the name of the alleged victim in that case, as is customary. Fast forward to last Thursday, March 18, 2021, when officers of the Richland County Sheriff's Department raided Gregory's home at 2508 Windsor Road in downtown Columbia shortly after 7:30 a.m. EDT. Deputies arrived at the residence with a search warrant ostensibly connected to the 2002 and 2004 child sex crimes Gregory is now facing. Again, this news outlet is declining to publish the name of the alleged victims in that ongoing investigation. In reporting on the raid of Gregory's home, we reached out to our law enforcement sources in the hopes of determining whether the search warrant or the sheriff's investigation into Gregory had anything to do with Dinwiddie's 1992 disappearance, as our sources were suggesting it did. We were told unequivocally that it did not have a nexus to the Dinwiddie case. Still, speculation in Columbia has persisted. In fact, we have spoken to dozens of Midlands residents over the last few days who are following the news related to Gregory's arrest very closely. Almost to a person, they believe fervently that the high-profile raid on Gregory's home last week was driven by the Dinwiddie case, not by the sex charges with which the prominent attorney has since been charged. Is this speculation credible? Let's ponder that for a moment. Gregory is certainly well known around town for seeking the attention of younger women, although this hardly makes him unique among the city's cabal of aging attorneys. He's a 60-year-old man who likes 20-year-old girls, one of the attorney's close friends told us, adding there is nothing illegal about that. Certainly not, nor is there anything original about it either. But rumors also abound as to the sort of behavior Gregory has allegedly engaged in once he captures the attention of these younger women. At least one source with direct experience in these matters told us Gregory is a sadist or an individual who derives sexual gratification from inflicting suffering or humiliation on others. Allegations of abuse dogged Gregory's former marriage, and sources familiar with that relationship tell us they absolutely believe he is the type of person who would have been capable of targeting and harming Dinwiddie. He abused her horribly, one source told us, referring to Gregory's former wife. He beat her mercilessly. Additionally, the charges filed last week against Gregory, above center, certainly lend themselves to allegations of sexual deviancy with younger women. Is there more to it, though? Specifically, is there anything related to Dinwiddie or her disappearance? Well, Gregory was reportedly in Columbia, SC at the time Dinwiddie vanished. His home was mere blocks away from where she lived with her parents at the time. And as he is today, Gregory was reportedly known by those close to him in the fall of 1992 for seeking out the attention of younger women and for frequenting the Five Points district, where these younger women went to bars with their friends. Jungle gyms was one of his favorite watering holes, we are told. In fact, Gregory was reportedly friends with at least one of the bartenders at this establishment, a bartender who was working at the club on the night Dinwiddie vanished. Does any of this make him an abductor, though? Or a murderer? No, it does not. All of the speculation connecting Gregory to Dinwiddie's disappearance is just that, pure speculation. Circumstantial conjecture. Unverified, unsubstantiated rumor. It would not be enough event to get a search warrant, to say nothing of a probable cause indictment from a grand jury or a guilty verdict in a court of law. Again, as of this writing, there is absolutely nothing tangible connecting Gregory to the Dinwiddie case. Furthermore, there is absolutely no indication that the current investigation into Gregory has anything whatsoever to do with Dinwiddie's disappearance. In fact, our law enforcement and prosecutorial sources have stated precisely the opposite, definitively asserting to us that the current investigation into Gregory is not connected to Dinwiddie. Why, then, do so many in Colombia continue to whisper Gregory's name in the same breath as Dinwiddie? Why does Gregory continue to be in text threads, telephone chats and living room conversations all over the capital city, a person of interest in her disappearance? As he has been since last fall? Fueling the fires to some extent was the unconventionally extensive and aggressive nature of the Thursday morning police raid on Gregory's home. Do cops normally raid people's houses for inappropriately touching a child almost 20 years ago? One of our sources asked us rhetorically. No, they do not. Indeed, the first-hand accounts we heard of this raid, including the presence of a battering ram, of deputies approaching the residence with their guns drawn, the use of a loudspeaker, and the initial refusal of Gregory to voluntarily exit the premises, seem inconsistent with the charges he is currently facing. Overkill, one attorney familiar with such cases told us. Even veteran law enforcement officers who spoke with us confidentially seem to believe there is more to Gregory's recent arrest than meets the eye. I think they are guarding the Dinwiddie part of the investigation, one such law enforcement veteran told us bluntly. Certainly we would not put it past police and prosecutorial sources to take steps to safeguard such a high-profile case. Nor would we, necessarily, begrudge them for intentionally misleading us and other reporters regarding the status of such an investigation. Sometimes such deflection is necessary to maintain an investigatory advantage. But again, as of this writing, there is nothing to suggest this is what is happening. Police have long believed Dinwiddie was kidnapped and have suggested it was likely a carefully planned abduction, considering the lack of witnesses or evidence connected to her disappearance. As we noted in a previous report, there was literally no crime scene. Dinwiddie just vanished, in the words of former solicitor and current state senator Dick Harpootlian, whose office worked the case. Many have speculated Dinwiddie may have been abducted by someone she knew, or at the very least someone who had been stalking her for a long period of time, per a report on the blog True Crime Files. At the time of Dinwiddie's disappearance, the Five Points region was not blanketed with modern surveillance cameras. Nor was there as heavy a police presence as there, arguably, is today, but the area was still quite crowded. This has led many to speculate that Dinwiddie, who was said to have been a very cautious person, may have somehow been familiar with the person who abducted her. Again, though we simply do not know what happened. Like everything else related to this case, all we have to go on at this point is speculation. Which isn't enough. All we can say for certain is that a beautiful young woman with her whole adult life ahead of her vanished without a trace, leaving her friends and family to continue an agonizing, decades-long wait for some sort of resolution regarding her fate.
Number 4.
In June 1959, 4-year-old Danny Barter disappeared from Perdido Bay, Alabama, while on a camping trip with his family. He has never been seen again. Paul Barter was raised in the Mobile, Alabama area and enlisted in the U.S. Army. He met Maxine Thompson at a local restaurant where she worked as a waitress. The two married and eventually had 7 children, 5 boys and 2 girls. Maxine became a homemaker after she had the children. Daniel Danny Barter was born on December 12, 1954, to Paul and Maxine Barter, the third youngest of the Barter children. In 1959, Paul was a stockroom manager for Morrison's Cafeteria in Mobile, and the Barters lived in a home on Thrush Drive in Mobile. On June 16, 1959, Paul, and Maxine and 4 of the Barter children, Steve, 11, Ronald, 10, Bobby, 8, and Danny, 4, along with Paul's brother, Jim Barter and his 11-year-old son Renault, loaded up their station wagon and drove to Perdido Bay, Al for a camping trip at the beach. The Barter's other children, Teresa and Michael, stayed in Mobile with Jim's wife, Vera Barter. Their other daughter, Wanda, then almost 13, was spending summer vacation with Maxine's mother, Rennie Thompson, in Toxie, Alabama. That night, Paul and Jim slept in the tent, and Maxine and the children slept in the station wagon. It was a camping trip, but they actually went there to help clear the land for a beach house they wanted to build, said Danny's sister, Wanda, in 2008. It was a little way back from the beach, and there was quite a bit of sand. The water there was shallow, and you could walk a long way out into the bay before it got past your knees. The area Wanda was referring to is along Boykin Boulevard in Lillian, Alabama, only an hour's drive from their home in Mobile. Jim Barter owned the land they were camping on. On the morning of June 17, 1959, Maxine, Danny, and one of his brothers drove to a store in Lillian to buy soft drinks, breakfast food, and a few snacks. Early reports say it was Danny's father who went to the store, but this is incorrect. When they returned to the campsite, Maxine fixed breakfast, and Paul played with the children. Afterward, Danny grabbed a bottle of Nehi soda to drink. Paul and Maxine promised to take him fishing later in the shallow Perdido Bay waters. Between 9:30 and 10 a.m., Maxine was untangling fishing poles, fishing lines, and putting hooks on. Danny was standing next to her during this time. A short while later, she looked up, and Danny was gone. She searched for Danny for about 10 minutes. When she could not find him, Maxine ran to a nearby house and called the police. Police, hundreds of volunteers, and sailors from Naval Air Station Pensacola and other bases along the Alabama and Florida coast searched for missing Danny Barter day and night. Alligators were gutted to check for human remains, but nothing turned up. Dr. S.R. Monroe, a veterinarian from Gadsden, Alabama, saw the newspaper articles on Danny's disappearance. He owned Champion bloodhounds at the time. Monroe called Baldwin County Sheriff Taylor Wilkins and offered to use his dogs to help search for Danny. Wilkins eagerly accepted. Monroe rushed to Perdido Bay, and he and his dogs spent several days searching the area for Danny Barter. The dogs kept going back to the pavement. Monroe concluded the child did not leave the scene walking. He also said that if Danny had been attacked and eaten by an alligator, his dogs would have led him to the scene of the attack, and they didn't. Wilkins agreed it was unlikely that an alligator killed Danny. Danny was afraid of the water, so his family did not believe he went in independently. Maxine told law enforcement officials she believed someone kidnapped her son, but they didn't listen to her. According to Wanda, you could see the bridge going into Florida from the site. Someone could have grabbed Danny, got on US 98, and been long gone in a couple of hours. However, Wilkins soon believed the kidnapping theory. Before the boy disappeared, he was holding his Nehi soft drink. No trace of that bottle was ever found, despite the massive search for Danny. This also led police to discount the alligator theory. Danny Barter was never found. Maxine Barter believed that if someone had kidnapped her son, he or she would take good care of him because he was such a sweet and beautiful boy. A few bizarre incidents occurred before Danny Barter's disappearance, which further pointed to an abduction. About a month before Danny vanished, Maxine was hanging clothes to dry on the clothesline in their backyard when she saw a strange man parked in a car on Thrush Drive in front of their home. Maxine felt uneasy about the man because many young girls lived in the neighborhood. She started walking towards the mystery man, but he put a newspaper up to cover his face. As she got closer to the man's car, he drove away. One evening, a neighbor's German shepherd took off barking and ran around to the side of the Barter's outhouse. When the dog's owner went after the dog, she saw a man peering into the Barter boys' bedroom window. The boys, including Danny, were asleep on bunk beds at the time. The woman ran to get Maxine, but the man fled. There were several clearly defined footprints in the soil beneath the window. Mobile Police Department made casts of the prints, but it is unclear what happened with them. Another incident took place when Maxine, Danny, and one of his brothers went to the Lillian grocery store on June 17. Danny and his brother stayed in the car while Maxine went inside. An unknown man pulled up alongside the Barter station wagon and stared intently at the boys before driving off. Danny's brother felt really uncomfortable and told Maxine about it. She didn't give it much thought until after Danny disappeared. The Barters relocate. Maxine had a hard time living in the Thrush Drive home without Danny. Every time she went to the grocery store, someone would mention Danny's disappearance, and she couldn't handle it. Paul Barter was approved for a Veterans Affairs (VI) loan, so the family bought a house on Mobile's Dog River. But they still struggled with Danny's disappearance and, in 1962, relocated to Choctaw County, about 115 miles north of Mobile, and moved into a home owned by Maxine's brother. Paul got a job as a cook on a boat out of Louisiana and was gone a lot. In 1963, one of Maxine's sister, who resided in Corpus Christi, Texas, became seriously ill. After taking a trip to visit her, the Barter family decided to relocate to Texas. Paul Barter died from a heart attack in 1965 at the age of 46. Danny Barter's case went cold for decades. Police had zero evidence of his fate. In 2008, the FBI reopened Danny's case after hearing about a conversation. Investigators received a tip that a person was sitting in a public place talking about what happened to Danny. Family members submitted DNA samples to a national missing person database if any evidence turned up that could be tested to determine if it belonged to Danny. Maxine Barter passed away in 1995. Unbeknownst to Maxine at the time of Danny's disappearance, she was 1 month pregnant with her 8th child, a boy later named Anthony. He was born in February 1960 and passed away from Hodgkin's disease in 1997. Danny's brother, Robert Barter, passed away in 2010. His surviving siblings still live in Texas and hope their brother's fate will one day be known. Danny's smiling face is still seen on the FBI's website.
Number 5.
On June 21, 2013, Brookelyn and Paige took their driving tests. While Brookelyn passed, Paige failed, something that became a running joke amongst the family throughout the remainder of the day. That night, the family attended their papa's 70th birthday party. As he had been ill, the occasion was important to everyone in attendance. After the birthday party, Brookelyn and Paige attended another on Red Lick Road, along with their cousin. According to Paige, her sister knew the majority of those in attendance. Between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m., Paige and the cousin decided to leave, while Brookelyn, who had pre-packed her overnight bag, made plans to stay with a friend who was also at the party. When it came time to leave, Brookelyn discovered her friend was planning on spending the night at a boy's house. This made Brookelyn uncomfortable, and the pair argued. Witnesses claim Brookelyn caught a ride with 2 men, whose identities are currently being withheld. The trio drove to Floyd Branch Road to look at some horses, and later one of the men was dropped off at his home. The other took Brookelyn to his house, located in the 100 block of Dillon Court, just off U.S. Highway 421. As it was in foreclosure, there was no water or electricity. At 4 a.m. on June 22, Brookelyn called Paige and asked if their cousin could pick her up. However, as the cousin had been drinking, they were unable to. Not wanting to wake up her mother, Brookelyn then contacted her ex-boyfriend, who was at work at the time. She sent him several texts, which read, "Can you hurry? Please hurry and I'm scared." At 5:30 a.m., Brookelyn's ex-boyfriend received another text from her cell phone, this time reading, "Never mind, I'm okay. I'm going to a party in Rockcastle County." When he asked who she was with, he received no response. That day, Brookelyn had made plans to attend a car show in Somerset, Kentucky with some friends, but never showed up and couldn't be reached by phone. Concerned, her friends contacted Paige. Upon learning Brookelyn was missing, her family began to call and search for her. Paige told the family that her friends said she'd left the party with 2 men who no one in the family knew by name. They believed, however, one of them was a friend or relative of her ex-boyfriend. Paige managed to find one of the men's phone numbers and Tasha gave him a call. She told him they were worried about Brookelyn, and he confirmed that she'd gotten a ride with him, but that he'd left while she was at his house as he was uncomfortable staying given her relationship with her ex-boyfriend. Before he left, he said he'd heard her talking about a party in Rockcastle County while smoking a cigarette on the front porch. 20 minutes after the call ended, the man telephoned Tasha back, saying he was scared. All of Brooklyn's belongings, including her cowboy boots, purse and some clothing, were at his house, and he believed the cigarette she'd been smoking had been the cause of a fire on his porch that morning. When he'd returned home around 7 a.m., the couch on the front porch was ablaze, and he called the fire department. Once 24 hours had passed, Brooklyn's mother filed a police report. Brooklyn's family and friends went to Dillon Court to search and saw the aforementioned items she'd left behind. They noted that only the clothing she'd been wearing and her cell phone were missing. According to police, records show her cell phone received more than 1,000 calls within 24 hours from people trying to reach her. According to firefighters, the couch fire has been deemed suspicious. On the Sunday after Brooklyn's disappearance, Kentucky State Police began conducting interviews. The owner of the house, where Brooklyn was last seen, was amongst those interviewed, but nothing about the meeting has been publicly released. In the early days of the investigation, police requested that property owners in Estill, Rockcastle, Jackson, and Madison counties check their land for any signs of the missing girl. They were told to pay close attention to freshly turned earth and unusual smells, ditch lines and remote areas. Authorities searched more than 16,000 acres in 3 Kentucky counties. Large-scale searches were conducted in the Red Lick area and nearby Owsley Fork Lake by police, cadets, people on horseback, and by search dogs. Cadaver dogs were also brought in, and divers searched nearby bodies of water. 3 weeks after Brooklyn's disappearance, nearly 200 volunteers, including some on horseback, searched an area within 1.5 miles of her last known location. A month into the investigation, a fundraiser was held to help fund a cash reward. As well, businesses began selling diesels for $5, with all proceeds going to the reward fund. In July 2013, all foot searches for Brooklyn were called off.
Number 6.
Bryce Laspisa was the only child of Michael and Karen Laspisa, and he had been born and raised in Illinois. Not long after he graduated from high school in 2012, the family moved across the country to California. Bryce seemed to adjust to life in California without any problems. A gifted artist, he was majoring in graphic and industrial design at Sierra College in Rocklin, and he did very well in school. He was still young, but had already built up an impressive portfolio of work. Bryce was extremely charismatic, with a friendly and open demeanor that instantly put people at ease. He made a number of friends during his freshman year at Sierra College and had also started dating another student, Kim Sly. At the end of the school year, he returned to his parents' home in Laguna Niguel, about 465 miles south of his college. He was close with his parents and seemed happy to be home with them. He spent part of the summer taking an English class at a local college. This gave him a jump start on earning the credits he would need to get his degree. The fall semester started on August 26, 2013. Bryce attended a speech class and a web design class that day, and he called his mother that night to tell her how much he liked them. As far as Karen was concerned, the conversation had been perfectly normal. Bryce was upbeat and excited about the new semester, and it didn't seem like there was anything she needed to be concerned about. Those who saw Bryce on a daily basis, however, were worried about him. He hadn't been acting like himself since his return to Rocklin 2 weeks earlier, and his behavior was growing increasingly erratic. Bryce had never been a bad kid, he was a typical teenager in college. His parents knew he was no stranger to alcohol and had probably tried marijuana a few times. While they didn't endorse this behavior, they were realistic. It was something almost every teenager did at some point, and their son was no exception. Right after he returned to Rocklin, though, Bryce started drinking increasing amounts of hard liquor on a daily basis. He had never done this before, and his friends were understandably confused and concerned. Bryce shrugged off their concern and wouldn't admit that there was anything wrong. Things started to spiral completely out of control right around the time that classes started. On Tuesday, Bryce's behavior seemed to get even odder. Kim knew that he had been drinking rather heavily lately, but this seemed to be more than just alcohol. Concerned, she asked Bryce what was wrong, but he insisted that everything was fine. When Kim continued to press him, he finally admitted that, in addition to drinking, he had taken the drug Vyvanse. An amphetamine-based narcotic, Vyvanse is a potent stimulant, and the effect it has on a person is similar to that of methamphetamine. It has become a popular recreational drug on many college campuses, as it provides an energy boost that allows the user to go without any sleep for an extended period of time. Bryce and a friend had stayed up all night playing video games, and they had been taking Vyvanse so they wouldn't feel tired. Kim was concerned, as this was uncharacteristic behavior for Bryce, but he didn't seem to think it was a big deal. He seemed to grow frustrated with Kim for questioning him, and finally sent her a text message saying that she would be better off without him anyway. Confused, Kim asked if he was breaking up with her, and he indicated that he was. Around 11 p.m. that night, Bryce called his mother from Kim's apartment in Chico. It's unclear why Bryce decided to visit Kim, as he hadn't changed his mind about breaking up with her, and he still refused to give any reasons for his sudden decision. Worried about his erratic behavior, Kim took his car keys away from him and begged him to get some sleep before attempting to drive home. Bryce told her he wanted to leave and demanded his keys back. When Kim refused to do so, he called his mother, complaining that Kim wouldn't allow him to go home. He insisted that his mom speak to her and tell her to return his car keys to him. After speaking with Karen, Kim gave Bryce his car keys and he left her apartment around 11:30 p.m. The following morning, Bryce's parents got an automated message from their insurance confirming that there had been a roadside assistance request placed for one of their vehicles. Confused, they tried to call Bryce, wondering if he had some kind of car trouble on the drive home from Kim's apartment. They were surprised to learn from Bryce's roommate that he had never returned home the night before. Karen tried to reach Bryce on his cell phone, but he didn't answer. Looking online, they were able to determine the name of the auto shop that had come to Bryce's aid. They learned that Bryce had called roadside assistance around 9 a.m. that morning from the small town of Buttonwillow, more than 350 miles south of Kim's apartment. It was clear that Bryce must have driven non-stop throughout the night to get there. Repeated calls to Bryce went unanswered. Either he had turned his phone off or he was purposely ignoring his parents. Michael had better luck when he called the small repair shop that had responded to Bryce's call for roadside assistance. Christian, the employee who responded to the call, told Karen that Bryce had gotten as far as the Buttonwillow rest area before running out of gas and he had delivered 3 gallons of gas to him around 9:30 a.m. When he learned Karen had been unable to get a hold of her son, Christian offered to drive back over to the rest area to see if Bryce was still there. Christian didn't really expect to see Bryce. It had been almost 3 hours since the roadside assistance call, and he assumed that Bryce had most likely continued on to wherever he was going. He was surprised when he pulled into the rest area and saw Bryce sitting in his car in the exact spot he had been in that morning. Bryce seemed surprised to see Christian as well, even more so when Christian handed him his cell phone and told him his mother wanted to talk to him. Karen was relieved to hear her son's voice, but was confused about the situation in general. When she asked Bryce what he was doing, he didn't have an answer. Although Bryce offered little in the way of information, his voice was clear, and there was nothing to indicate he was intoxicated. Since Bryce was only about 3 hours away from Laguna Niguel, Karen decided that the questioning could wait. All Bryce had to do was get back on Interstate 5 and he would be home in a matter of hours. She reminded Bryce to fill up his gas tank and said they would expect to see him at home around 3 p.m. Bryce agreed. When Bryce hadn't arrived at their home by 3:30 p.m., his parents started to get worried. They had no luck calling Bryce, as once again he wasn't answering his cell phone. They tried to tell themselves that Bryce was probably stuck in traffic somewhere, but as the hours ticked by and there was still no word from him, they knew they weren't dealing with a simple traffic jam. Worried that Bryce may have been in a car accident, they called the police and reported him missing. Wisely, the first thing the police did was call Bryce's cell phone provider and have them ping his phone to see if they could come up with his location. Once they did, it didn't take long to find him. Almost 10 hours after he had made the call to roadside assistance, Bryce was still in Buttonwillow. Once they learned Bryce's location, 2 Kern County deputies were dispatched to check on him. He had filled up his gas tank like his mother instructed, but rather than get on Interstate 5, he had simply parked near it. If he was surprised to see the deputies, he hid it well. He was polite and cooperative and told them he was just trying to blow off some steam before continuing his drive home. It was a reasonable explanation, but deputies wanted to make sure he really was okay to drive. They had him get out of the car and perform some field sobriety tests on him. He passed easily. He told them they were welcome to search his car, and they didn't find anything: no drugs, no alcohol, no weapons. Bryce wasn't a minor, and he hadn't committed any crimes, so the police had no reason to detain him. Before they let him go, however, they told him he needed to call his mother. They were surprised when Bryce seemed reluctant to do so, even after they told him that she had been extremely worried about him. Finally, one of the officers took Bryce's phone and called Karen himself. He assured her that Bryce had passed their field sobriety tests and appeared to be fine. They had no qualms about him being on the road, and this reassured Karen somewhat. She then spoke briefly with her son, telling him that he needed to get himself something to eat and then get back on the road. He said that he would. After Bryce spoke with his mother, the deputies left, satisfied that he was finally ready to make the drive home. Despite his assurances that he would be on his way shortly, Bryce was still sitting in the same spot a few hours later when Christian drove by. He called Karen to tell her that Bryce was still parked on the side of the road and told her that he would follow Bryce to the interstate to make sure he got on it. Bryce seemed to realize that he wasn't going to get away with lingering any longer, especially if the police had to come back. He bought a soda at a nearby gas station and told Christian he was going to start driving home. Finally, more than 13 hours after he arrived there, Bryce left Buttonwillow and got on Interstate 5. Christian followed him for about 10 miles and didn't observe anything unusual about his driving. He called Karen back to let her know that Bryce was finally on Interstate 5 and heading south in the direction of Laguna Niguel. Around 1:50 a.m., Bryce told his mother that he had briefly detoured off of the interstate. While he said he couldn't say for sure where he was using his GPS and had estimated that he would arrive at the house at 3:25 a.m. Bryce called his parents again at 2:09 a.m. to say that he was simply too tired to drive anymore, so he had decided to get off the interstate and take a nap. Karen and Michael knew that they wouldn't be able to sleep well, but managed to get a few hours of rest. When they heard the doorbell ring at 8 a.m. the next morning, they looked at each other in relief. They opened the front door expecting to see Bryce, but found a California Highway Patrol officer standing on their front steps. Bryce's car had been found, wrecked and abandoned, on a paved access road leading to the Keeshae Lake main boat ramp. It had plummeted down a 25-foot embankment before smashing onto the road below. All of Bryce's belongings were still in the car, but there was no sign of Bryce. For the second time in 12 hours, Michael and Karen had to report their son missing. The town of Keeshae is located right off of Interstate 5, roughly 90 miles north of Laguna Niguel. Cars traveling on the interstate connects it onto Lake Hughes Road, which leads up a hill to the Keeshae Lake Recreation Area. Every car traveling up this hill has to pass by a surveillance camera that takes a photograph of each car's license plate. At 2:15 a.m., just a few minutes after he told his mother that he was too tired to continue driving, Bryce drove past this camera. Then, at 4:29 a.m., Bryce passed by the same camera a second time. Since there are no cameras tracking cars as they come down the hill, there is no way of knowing how long Bryce remained at the top of the hill the first time he drove up. It's also impossible to know what Bryce was doing and why he went up the hill a second time. The exact time of the accident is unknown, but the wrecked car was discovered less than an hour after Bryce's car was seen heading up the hill a second time. Officers were on scene before 5:30 a.m., and there was no sign of anyone near the car at that time. There appeared to be no witnesses to the crash, so police had to try to piece together what had happened. Once they analyzed all the evidence, they came to the surprising conclusion that what had taken place had not been accidental. It looked like Bryce had been in complete control of the car as it sped towards the ravine, and he continued to hit the accelerator the entire way down. Investigators determined that Bryce had driven up the hill on Lake Hughes Road, then entered an access area for a cell phone tower. They were able to follow his tire tracks past the tower, which was located at the top of a steep embankment, and then down the embankment itself. The car continued to accelerate until it smashed into the access road below. When police arrived, they found the car lying on its side, banged up but intact. One of the car's rear windows had been smashed out from the inside, and police believe Bryce had smashed the window in order to free himself from the wreckage. Most of his belongings, including his cell phone and laptop, were found inside the car. Bryce's duffel bag, which contained clothes and his wallet, was found on the ground outside not far from the broken rear window. The bag had been unzipped and looked as if someone, most likely Bryce, had been rummaging through it. It had been a violent crash, and Bryce had probably been dazed by the impact with the ground, but investigators do not believe he was seriously injured in the accident. They found a few small drops of his blood in the front seat of the car, but none near the broken window he used to get out of the car. There was no blood found on the road outside the car, and they found no drag marks or any other evidence to indicate that Bryce had been seriously hurt and unable to walk. It appeared that Bryce had been able to walk away from the crash relatively uninjured, but where had he gone? A massive search of the area took place the same day Bryce's car had been found. Dozens of deputies scoured the land surrounding the crash site and the shore of Keeshae Lake, while helicopters conducted aerial searches. They had a vast area to search. The Keeshae Lake State Recreation Area alone covered nearly 7 square miles, and the ruggedness of the terrain made it a complicated task. The Santa Clarita Valley Search and Rescue Team arrived on Saturday to assist in the search. They spent 10 hours combing through the area, but found no trace of Bryce. Bryce's parents used social media to spread the word that their son was missing, and the online community immediately rallied behind them. Bryce, with his friendly smile and easygoing manner, had never had any problems making friends. Now, his smile was winning over complete strangers on the internet. Within hours, people started contacting Bryce's parents to see what they could do to help. Missing posters were printed and distributed by a network of volunteers. A team of search dogs were brought in from out of state, and Kim drove down to the search area with a pair of Bryce's sneakers and socks so that the dogs would have something with Bryce's scent. After some of the search dogs tracked Bryce's scent near Government Cove, divers were sent into that area. They concentrated on the shallow areas near the shoreline, then methodically worked their way out to deeper water. They were unable to find anything indicating Bryce had been in the lake. While search and rescue teams were scouring the area for any sign of Bryce, detectives began interviewing some of Bryce's friends and family. Once they determined that Bryce had purposely sped down the embankment and crashed onto the road below, investigators had to consider the possibility that Bryce may have been suicidal. His parents were adamant that Bryce would not have taken his own life, but some of his friends at college weren't so sure. Detectives were sent to interview those who had spent time with Bryce in the days leading up to his disappearance, and they learned some unsettling things. Of all his friends at college, Sean and Kim were the two who had known Bryce the best, and both had expressed concerns about Bryce's behavior before he went missing. They told detectives that Bryce had begun drinking heavily when he returned to Rockland for the fall semester. He appeared to prefer hard liquor to beer and could finish off several bottles in a weekend. They didn't believe that Bryce was an alcoholic. He had never appeared to have a problem with drinking prior to this, but it was clear something had been going on in his life that was troubling him. Kim told investigators that she had been extremely worried when she learned that Bryce was taking amphetamine tablets in addition to drinking heavily. His entire personality seemed to change once he started combining the two drugs, and it frightened her. That was why she had taken his car keys away from him that Wednesday night. It had nothing to do with her being upset that he had broken up with her. She tried to keep Bryce at her apartment because she knew he was in no condition to be driving, but no one had wanted to listen to her. Now, it looked like she had been proven right in a horrifying way. Sean had also been worried about Bryce. He told detectives that, in addition to drinking and taking Vyvanse, Bryce had done something extremely odd. He had been giving away some of his possessions. He had given Sean his Xbox console and some of his games, as well as a pair of diamond earrings that had been a gift from his mother. It made Sean very uneasy, and he tried to refuse, but Bryce wouldn't take no for an answer. For the investigators, this was a huge red flag. When someone starts giving cherished possessions away out of the blue, it's usually a sign that they don't believe they'll be around much longer. It can be a precursor to committing suicide, or they could be planning to run away and start life over somewhere else. Giving away their belongings is a way for them to cut ties with their current life. If Bryce had been suicidal, his high-speed drive down the embankment may have been a failed suicide attempt. It's possible he was surprised to find himself relatively unharmed at the bottom of the ravine. It could explain why, after freeing himself from his mangled car, Bryce had simply walked away without taking any of his belongings. Some of the investigators thought Bryce might have left his car and walked the relatively short distance down to Keeshae Lake and drowned. Divers spent days in the lake searching for any sign of Bryce, but were unable to find anything to suggest he had ended up in the lake. Eventually, the search was called off, and detectives concluded Bryce was almost certainly not in the lake. In fact, they didn't believe he was going to be found in the area at all. While some of the investigators believed that Bryce had been suicidal, the fact that they had been unable to locate his body forced them to consider other possible scenarios. Some thought Bryce had chosen to just walk away from his life. It was a theory that Karen and Michael refused to contemplate. They were adamant that Bryce loved them too much to even consider voluntarily disappearing. Yet when bloodhounds were brought in to see if they could pick up on Bryce's scent, their actions backed up the theory that Bryce had chosen to go missing. The dogs were able to pick up on Bryce's scent and track it as it moved away from the crash site. They followed the scent trail down to a dam on Keeshae Lake, then continued down the roadway on top of the dam. Once they crossed over, the dogs went south to a spillway on the western side of the lake before finally heading towards a truck stop. Investigators believed it was possible that Bryce, after crashing his car, made his way through the park and ended up at the nearby truck stop. If he had decided to hitch a ride with a long-haul trucker, he could have been long gone before the search for him even got started. While it was certainly possible, there was no logical reason for Bryce to have done so. He wasn't in any kind of legal trouble. He was a good student who had been excelling at college, and there were no problems at home. He had always maintained a close relationship with his parents, and he knew he could always count on them to support him no matter what. Of course, even if Bryce had gone to the truck stop, that didn't necessarily mean he was walking away from his life. While it didn't appear that Bryce had been badly wounded when he crashed his car, it's possible that he was suffering from a head injury and wasn't thinking straight. He may have headed towards the lights of the truck stop in an effort to get some help, only to have something happen to him there. It was also possible that a head injury had left him unable to remember his own name. He had walked away from his car without taking any of his belongings. Without his wallet, he had no access to cash and no way of proving his identity. Without his phone, he had no way of contacting anyone. After 2 weeks, police announced that the official search for Bryce was being scaled back. They had thoroughly searched all the areas where they thought Bryce could be, but found nothing. They had no evidence pointing in any one direction, and no idea if Bryce was alive or dead. With his bright red hair and blue eyes, Bryce would stick out in a crowd. Police received numerous calls from people who believed they had seen him, but investigators were unable to confirm any of them as being legitimate sightings. There may never be a definitive answer to what happened to Bryce, though it seems likely that he is no longer alive. He has been missing for over 7 years now, and there has not been a single confirmed sighting of him. If he had chosen to run off and start life anew somewhere else, it's hard to believe that he would have been able to keep his identity a secret for very long. His information has been entered into the National Missing Person Database, and his fingerprints, dental records, and DNA are all on file. His parents have never stopped their search for him and hope to one day know what happened to their only son. Bryce Laspisa has been missing since August 30, 2013. At the time, He was 5'11" and weighed around 170 pounds, with blue eyes and bright red hair, which he normally kept very short. He was last seen wearing a blue and white checkered shirt, a pair of white cargo shorts, and white Nike sneakers with red trim. He had a large tattoo on his right shoulder of a bull's head and his birth date in Roman numerals. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is still actively searching for Bryce's whereabouts. If you have any information, please call them at 323-890-5500.
Number 7.
On the night of September 26, 2016, Keeshae texted her mother to let her know she would be spending the night with a friend and would contact her the next morning. As she was 21 years old, Tony didn't ask her daughter who she was staying with, not wanting to pry. Keeshae was later dropped off by her friends at a house in the 3100 block of East Broad Street, located in the Church Hill district of Richmond. The area is near Chimborazo Park. While at her job as a dispatcher on September 27, Tony awaited a phone call from her daughter, letting her know she'd gotten home safely. Normally, Keeshae would call during Tony's lunch break, which usually fell between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m. However, no call came. Worried, she called Keeshae's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She then called Evan, who told her the last time he'd spoken to his sister was the previous night. When Tony returned home that evening, she noticed Keeshae still wasn't there. Worried, she called her daughter's friends and visited their houses, but there was no sign of her. Around 2 a.m. on September 28, after speaking with her sister, Tony contacted the Richmond Police Department to report Keeshae as missing, citing it was uncharacteristic for her daughter to leave without notice. The beginning of the search for Keeshae involved her friends and Tony going door to door in her neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen her. It was during this search that Tony was informed that her daughter's friends had been with Keeshae the night she disappeared, something they'd previously denied. When pushed for information, they explained that they'd dropped her off in Church Hill to meet someone, about 10 minutes from her house. However, they did not know who the person was. One specific friend, DeMarcus Hunt, shared that he was the one who drove her to the unknown male's house. He was under the impression that Keeshae would be meeting a mutual female friend there, which he claimed was later confirmed upon receiving a text from said friend. However, that was disputed by the female friend upon her being questioned by police, with her claiming to have never sent the text. After talking to DeMarcus, Tony drove to the man's house, where he offered up numerous accounts about the night of September 26. While he admitted to knowing Keeshae and seeing her that night, he claimed she had called for a ride not long after arriving and left. Tony then called the police, who searched the house, but were unable to find any signs of Keeshae. Due to the ongoing nature of the investigation, the identities of the female friend and unknown male have not been publicly released. Upon discovering Keeshae's last known location, investigators got to work searching the Church Hill area, which they did multiple times. They canvassed the area and handed out flyers. A look into Keeshae's cell phone records showed it had been off since the night of her disappearance. As well, her bank account remained untouched, and her email and Facebook account were inactive. Investigators have yet to recover her cell phone, ID or the overnight bag she brought with her that night. In order to help bring in new leads, her family and friends raised $3,000 for a reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of anyone involved in her disappearance. There have been numerous reported sightings of Keeshae, but nothing investigators have been able to verify. However, they believe she didn't run away or move to another state. Throughout the search for her daughter, Tony has been subjected to numerous prank phone calls and fake social media messages, all from people claiming to either be Keeshae or know where she is. Both Tony and those investigating the case have said precious time has been wasted looking into these fake leads. People have also lied to store owners in the Richmond area, saying Keeshae has been found and asking them to remove her flyers from their storefronts. In January 2017, tragedy struck Tony again when Devon was murdered. The 25-year-old had been gunned down outside a local Motel 6. The man who shot him, James Henshaw, was put on trial, and a jury found him guilty of second-degree murder. It is not believed Devon's murder is connected to Keeshae's disappearance. In 2018, an unidentified source claimed there is a man who has knowledge about the case and Keeshae's disappearance. He is currently serving time in prison for a violent crime against another woman. Specifically, the source said the prisoner has knowledge about Keeshae's whereabouts. However, it's unknown if he has spoken with investigators at this time. The Richmond Police Department says the case is currently at a standstill. Investigators believe there are people living in the East End, specifically in the Broad Street corridor, who have information that could help bring this case to a close. The only theory currently held in this case is that of investigators who believe Keeshae met with some form of foul play on the night she went missing. While they have not stated why they think this, it is important to note that there has been no indication that the missing woman was involved in drugs or any form of illegal activity. Tony is of the belief that her daughter is still alive and she continues to hold out hope that she'll one day return home. The family created the Help Find Keeshae Jacobs Facebook page to help keep the case in the public eye. Tony is currently working toward her associate's degree in human services at J. Sargent Reynolds Community College in Richmond. She recently accepted her certificate in substance abuse counseling, a program both her children had pushed her to sign up for back in 2015. Tony credits the Richmond Police Department and the Richmond community for helping her make it through both Keeshae's disappearance and Devon's murder. She regularly visits Morey Street Cemetery, where her son is buried. On the anniversary of Keeshae's disappearance, her family releases blue balloons as a memorial event. They have also held rallies, with one being held not far from the house where she was last seen. Through her daughter's disappearance, Tony has become an advocate for families who have lost loved ones. She partnered with the Richmond Police Department and the city's mayor, Lever Stoney, to mark Missing Persons Day each April. Keeshae Jacobs went missing from Richmond, Virginia, from the 3100 block of East Broad Street on September 26, 2016. She was 21 years old and was last seen wearing pink and black Nike basketball sneakers, a pink headscarf and black basketball shorts. She could have also possibly been wearing a silver Pandora bracelet with a Vegas charm. At the time of her disappearance, she stood between 5'03" and 5'33" and weighed approximately 100 to 110 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes and has the following tattoos: a rose on her shoulder, paw prints on her right thigh, a flower on her right wrist, Tony beneath a heart on her left shoulder, and a leaf on her right foot. Her ears are pierced and her fingernails were painted blue. Currently, her case is classified as endangered missing. If alive, she would be 24 years old. If you have any information regarding the case, you can contact the Richmond Police Department at 804-646-5125 or Crime Stoppers at 1-804-780-1000.
Number 8.
On July 22, 2001, Nikki attended church with Bobby before heading home to run errands. While Bobby would be heading to the mall to help his cousin get his tuxedo sized, she decided to do laundry. So she dropped Peyton off at her parents' house before heading to Richmond Coin Laundry, located in the vicinity of the 1100 block of Southeast Street. While her clothes were drying, Nikki once again dropped by her parents' house, where she mentioned to her mother that two men were harassing her. According to her mother, she appeared agitated but decided to return to the laundromat instead of using her parents' dryer. Upon Bobby returning home from the fitting, he saw his fiancée had yet to return home. Thinking she was running a bit late, he decided to watch television until she returned. When 6 p.m. rolled around, Nikki still hadn't returned home, which worried Bobby. Wondering if anyone else in the family had seen his fiancée, he called her sisters, Michelle and Tammy, but neither had seen her since she'd stopped by their parents' house earlier in the day. Nikki was late picking up Peyton from her parents' house, but her mother wasn't too worried, thinking she might have gone to work, which she was known to do on a spur of the moment. However, as the night progressed and no one heard from Nikki, the family began to share in Bobby's worry. Around 10 p.m., the family took to the highway and made their way to Dayton, believing Nikki may have gotten into a car accident. They also called local hospitals but could come up with no leads. At 2 a.m. on July 23, Nikki's dad insisted the family go to police to file a missing persons report. However, The Richmond Police Department saw no reason to be concerned, as Nikwi was an adult and there were no indications of any trouble. Nikwi's family searched through her and Bobby's apartment, where they discovered she'd left behind her purse and her ID when she had gone to the laundromat. They also obtained footage from the deli located near Richmond Coin Laundry, which showed Nikwi making a purchase the day before. It didn't give any indication that anything was wrong. Investigators got involved in the case upon Nikwi missing a shift at the Montgomery Education and Pre-Release Center. She rarely missed work, so this struck both them and her family as extremely concerning. They checked hotels and the residences near the laundromat, but could come up with nothing concrete. Police looked into her mother's concerns about the men who had been harassing her daughter, but, when asked, no one at the laundromat had seen anything suspicious. They then looked through Nikwi's bank account and cell phone records, but they didn't reveal anything, as neither had been used since her disappearance. While the police ground search was occurring, Nikwi's family knocked on doors and handed out flyers with her information. Not long after police got involved, a helicopter search was done of Richmond and Dayton, in the hopes of finding her 1990 GMC Jimmy 4x4, which was missing along with Nikwi. However, their search failed to turn up the vehicle. One of the first persons of interest in the case was Bobby, as his actions after his fiancée's disappearance had struck investigators as unusual. The day after she went missing, he called Sinclair Community College to ask for her unused tuition back, after which he was reported to have become irate upon being told her education was being paid for by her employer. He also tried to return their wedding rings, but wasn't able to because they had been purchased under Nikwi's name and had cancelled the wedding venue in order to get the deposit back. While police and Nikwi's family saw these actions as suspicious, Bobby maintains he was only doing them in order to raise money to help in the search for his fiancée. He had wanted to purchase a cell phone and use the remaining money to help fund a reward. Police brought him in for a polygraph test, which showed signs of deception. However, as there was no evidence of a crime having been committed or anything linking him to Nikwi's disappearance, they could not proceed further. However, as the case progressed, it was publicly announced that Bobby was no longer considered a person of interest, as another suspect had come to light. Bobby feels the focus on him was a waste of time and has shared his doubts that the Richmond Police Department will be able to solve the case. Investigators' focus on him also led to friction between him and the McCown family, with them freezing him out at the time he was brought in for questioning. As the months went on, the McCown family began to feel frustration over the lack of progress made in Nikwi's case, accusing the police of not doing their job. As such, they started their own search efforts, which led to investigators feeling they were overstepping their boundaries. As such, they threatened members of the family with arrest if they kept up their actions. At 7:30 a.m. on November 3, 2001, the Richmond Police Department received a call from the Dayton Police Department saying that Nikwi's vehicle had been found in the parking lot of the Meadows of Catalpa apartment complex, located in Dayton. It was found with her laundry folded in the back, and when towed back to Indiana for examination, held no evidence and showed no signs of a break-in or a struggle. The apartment complex is where Stephen Johnston lived, so he was brought in for a polygraph test, which he passed. He also offered up his DNA. Given his cooperation and the evidence they have, police feel the vehicle's position was merely a coincidence, and Stephen was not involved in his ex-girlfriend's disappearance. Following the discovery of the vehicle, investigators began looking into a co-worker of Nikwi's named Tommy Swint. He lived about a 1/4 mile away from the apartment complex and was known to have had a complicated relationship with Nikwi. They had conflicting ideas of their friendship, and Nikwi had experienced violence at the hands of Swint. Given all this, he was named a person of interest. Not long after this, it was discovered Nikwi had made a phone call to a female co-worker on July 22 to say she would be picking up vitamins at a pharmacy located near the Meadows of Catalpa. On November 5, 2002, Nikwi's sisters traveled to New York, where they shared their story on a talk show. While there, a psychic told them she had been murdered, which prompted police to search areas around Richmond Coin Laundry. However, nothing was found. In 2004, the family worked with a missing persons organization to raise a $100,000 reward for information leading to Nikwi's return. It had been hoped that the money would prompt someone to come forward, but no leads were called in before the reward expired. On the 5th anniversary of Nikwi's disappearance, a vigil was held for her at the laundromat. On August 30, 2007, detectives received news that Swint had been hired as a police officer in Trotwood, Ohio. The news shocked both them and Nikwi's family. Richmond police informed the Trotwood Police Department that he was a person of interest in their investigation and moved to have him dismissed. As such, Swint was told to either resign or have the dismissal process started. He chose to step down after less than 2 months on the force. Upon quitting, Swint sued both the city of Richmond and its police department, citing he was never told that he was a person of interest in Nikwi's disappearance. Richmond police insisted he was aware, and the lawsuits were ultimately dismissed. On November 29, 2007, upon seeing news coverage of Swint's lawsuits, an anonymous call was made to the Dayton Police Department, saying they should look into Swint in connection with an unsolved murder from the early 1990s. On December 17, 1991, a tree trimming crew discovered the partially nude body of Tina Marie Ivory, a prostitute who had been beaten and strangled before being wrapped in a quilt and placed in a pile of trash on Dayton Liberty Road, near Calumet Lane. At the time, police were unable to come up with any suspects. Through stains found on the quilt, they were able to create a DNA profile, but were never able to make a match. Upon receiving the tip, Richmond police provided Swint's DNA, which they had obtained during the lawsuits, to Dayton detectives, and it came back as a match. As such, they started to re-examine evidence to try and place him at the scene of the crime. This re-examination led to the discovery of a palm print on a piece of tape. On November 17, 2009, Dayton detectives traveled to Russell County, where Swint had since relocated, in order to obtain his fingerprints and conduct an interview with him. While he denied involvement in the murder, subsequent analysis of his fingerprints matched the print found on the tape. On February 3, 2010, a grand jury indicted Swint for Ivory's murder, and Dayton police prepared to arrest him in Alabama. However, as they approached his house, they heard a gunshot and later found him dead of an apparent suicide. Given Swint's actions and the evidence they've collected, investigators feel Swint was involved in Nikwi's disappearance. They are currently trying to get a co-worker with whom he was romantically involved with to speak with them, as they believe he might have told her something of importance. The Richmond Police Department says they're still actively working on the case. 1. The prominent theory in this case is that Tommy Swint was involved in Nikwi's disappearance, a theory held by both investigators and Nikwi's family. Given his actions before his death and current evidence, it's believed he came into contact with her at some point around the time she went missing, after which something transpired. 2. There are some who still believe Bobby to have been involved in his fiancée's disappearance. They cite his actions after she went missing as evidence of this. However, police have stated he is no longer a person of interest. As Peyton was only 9 years old at the time Nikwi went missing, she was raised by her grandmother and her aunts. She has since had a child of her own and holds out hope her mother will be found. Nikwi's father has since passed away. As the years have gone by and suspicion has shifted away from him, Bobby has once again become close with Nikwi's family, especially with Peyton. She says she views him as a stepfather of sorts. Every year on the anniversary of Nikwi's disappearance, her family gathers outside the laundromat to hold a vigil and mark the date. Marilyn McCown went missing from Richmond, Indiana on July 22, 2001. She was 28 years old and was last seen wearing a bright pink and purple floral swimsuit top, diamond earrings, dark-colored shorts and a white gold bracelet. At the time of her disappearance, she was 5'23" and weighed approximately 115 pounds. She has light brown hair and brown eyes, with a scar above her left eye, one on top of her head, and another on her lower left leg. Currently, her case is classified as endangered missing. If alive, she would be 46 years old. If you have any information regarding the case, you can contact the Richmond Police Department at 765-983-7247.